AWD came out to compete directly against that solution of ours. There was a ton of inventory that was completely frozen inside of AWD. So we've spent the last year obsessing about this. They had a TikTok that blew up, and I think people sometimes just overbet on Amazon. It's an incredible team, but they'll have challenges and you're not the biggest fish in the sea, and that poses a lot of different intricacies that you have to be able to navigate. So what happened after Q4 of 2024 is that brands needed a solution like Amazon AWD, but they needed it with... So I just landed. I was in Vancouver for the day. I'm back in Toronto in the HQ with the team. A little bit jet lagged, but it was a ton of fun. The warehouse is massive. I'll be posting it on socials. So I want to be covering about what we're building and why on the Amazon warehousing and distribution program, what sets us apart, what happened in Q4 and what's going to happen, and just a little bit about our vision and behind the scenes of what I'm building and some of the challenges around this very specific program. So first things first, Amazon AWD. So I'm going to be throwing a couple acronyms around, so just bear with me. But there's a few definitions I want to get out of the way. AWD, which is Amazon's warehousing and distribution program. There's AGL, which is Amazon Global Logistics. And then there's FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon. So if we look through a journey of a merchant and someone that is going through Amazon, AGL, think of it as the freight forwarding division. So what happens is that if you have product in China, AGL will actually pick up the stock and then move it to one of Amazon AWD warehouses, which is basically a bulk storage solution. So they will replenish the Amazon FBA facilities. So AGL will pick up the stock, Amazon AWD will store it in bulk for cheaper storage than FBA. And then as needed, AWD will then replenish FBA. And both these programs are still relatively new, and the goal around Amazon AWD specifically was to create this almost frictionless experience, right? So in the past, you would have to use a 3PL like AMZ Prep to bulk store the goods. So you would send it from China, we would bulk store it in one of our warehouses, and then we would drip feed into Amazon is the word that we use. So every week or bi-weekly, we would start feeding these shipments into the Amazon FBA facility. AWD came out to compete directly against that solution of ours. And it was sold off basically three functions. It was sold off a frictionless product, it was sold off no placement fees, and it was sold on auto replenish, meaning that if you use their smart routing, they would actually do the replenishments to Amazon on your behalf versus you doing your forecasting and then saying I need 100 items and sending a shipment into Amazon. They were doing this on your behalf. And in theory, this was a great solution. The challenge was that as Amazon AWD really got built last year, it's kind of the initial building block, the entire Amazon sales program was aggressively pushing one specific value prop, which was no placement fees. So going back to last year, Amazon rolled out their placement fee infrastructure, which for anyone listening, what happened with placement fees was that in the past, you'd actually have Amazon just do the splitting of your shipments on your behalf. And instead, they said, hey, well, we have two options. You can either send it to one of our warehouses, which is a national cross-dock, and we will do the splits on your behalf. So we'll send the stock to New York and Texas and LA and anywhere else in the country that we need to, but we'll charge you a nominal fee. That nominal fee ranges from 30 cents to a few dollars, depending on the size of the product. And if you don't want to do that, no problem. But you will have to split the shipment yourself. So then you have to split the shipment from your 3PL or your own warehouse 5 ways, which great, you're avoiding placement fee, but now you also have to pay for freight going to those 5 locations that I was just telling you guys about. So in parallel with this, Amazon started building what they call their cross-dock program. So they rolled out a nationwide infrastructure for basically facilities to do cross-dock, to basically receive product at one location and then do splits across the country. And in parallel, the entire Amazon team was pushing a very specific value prop to all of their merchants. No placement fees. And this was a great idea in theory, but what happened was that because they built all these warehouses, right, they're cross-dock plus Amazon AWD, which are these massive bulk storage facilities, like literally just picture it's just racking, right? So don't picture like a high volume fulfillment warehouse. Just picture bulk storage. It's pallets, it's case forwarding. It's just built for, case in or pallet in, pallet out. Very simple. And so they wanted to fill those warehouses. So what they did was they pushed this, hey, no placement fee for every merchant. So in parallel with, implementing no placement fees, they had a product to say, hey, well, you can get the best of both worlds. You can ship it to one warehouse, right, which is our Amazon AWD program, and we'll do the splits, but we won't charge you placement fees. So you truly got the best of all worlds. And because of this, merchants flooded the market. We saw a huge dip in our California warehouse at the moment because they all moved over to AWD. But what happened was that the infrastructure got completely overwhelmed. So in the Q4 of 2024, they got completely bottlenecked. So because all this stock was going to these national cross docks and AWD got overwhelmed, there was all these breaks in the infrastructure, which led to these massive delays, which then left to out of stocks. It left to rejecting shipments, and there was a ton of inventory that was completely frozen inside of AWD. Some merchants that we're speaking to, there was millions of dollars lost, not only from missed product revenue, but their inventory was frozen. You physically couldn't get the stock in or out. And this was sort of this breaking point for merchants that over-indexed on the program without maybe fully knowing what they got into. And, this year they're taking a step back to go like, all right, let's re-level the playing field and figure out how to play a little bit more chess than checkers. So why are we building a competing product? So what happened after Q4 of 2024 is that brands needed a solution like Amazon AWD, but they needed it with the flexibility, the support, the omnichannel, because a lot of these merchants are also selling B2B, D2C, TikTok shops exploding, and they needed support from all these other channels, but they wanted to make sure that they could solve for no placement fees, and most importantly, get stock into Amazon and get it in fast. So we mirrored a lot of the core functions and features of AWD that merchants loved. The Seller Central integration, the automatic shipping plan creation. Our facilities, we have national, nationwide facilities. So we were mimicking an entire cross-dock consolidation program, just like how they did. So we basically mirrored AWD's core functions, the ones that, we heard from thousands of merchants that they loved the most. No placement fees, Seller Central integration, so live, automatic shipping plan creations, the fast speed into Amazon, which is so critical, but then also this level of flexibility, right? The extra layer of love and TLC, which, depending on the size of you with Amazon, you might not be getting, or the flexibility for inventory. The merchants that we were working with are doing TikTok and Walmart and retail and D2C, and they sell everywhere, and they needed a partner that could do both, but could also almost mimic the same thought process of what Amazon AWD is. So we've spent the last year obsessing about this, and we pretty much have a product that's there. So how it basically works is that we have a solution very similar to Amazon AWD where merchants can bulk store with us, right? And the economics were probably 30% less than what AWD is, just because naturally we have a little bit less overhead, a little bit. So what we built was basically a direct solution compared to AWD. It was an alternative depending on your strategy as a merchant. And so how it works is that a merchant can integrate Seller Central through us. They can bulk store at one of our DCs. And we have a few facilities across the country that are meant for basically bulk storage, right? They're in very specific locations where we have discounted rates. So for example, our California facility is incredible, but it's California, it's expensive. I was just in Vancouver, and our Vancouver rates, Vancouver's one of the top 5 most expensive places in the world. So there's locations that are meant for speed and velocity versus some that are meant for unit economics. So we have a facility in Alabama, in Dallas, Texas, right? In Kentucky. These are places that we have a little more economic, so we are able to pass those savings over. So merchants will integrate their Seller Central. They'll bulk store in one of our warehouses. But then most importantly, because of the volume that we're sending out to Amazon, we're able to split a shipment 5 ways, just like AWD, and we have full trucks. going to every DC across the country. So this solves for a few things, right? So number one, it solves for the speed into Amazon. Because we have full trucks going daily, basically the merchant piggybacks our trucks that are going to the Amazon facilities. Number two, they're avoiding placement fees, right? Because we're splitting it 5 ways, you avoid that. But, that merchant might only be able to ship a pallet to New York, a pallet to Texas. With us, we have a full truck going to that same DC. But then third, most importantly, is that it also from a cost economics, right? You're basically piggybacking on a truck that's already going there. Like, we already paid for that truck. It has to go to, Pennsylvania too as an Amazon facility. Now, as a merchant, you get the ability to just put on that pallet or those 9 boxes or those 1,000 boxes. So this is how we've been building the infrastructure, and we've been trying to mimic, hey, what do merchants love about this AWD program? And what are some of the challenges? And how do we, to some extent, build the best of both worlds while also making sure that we're competitive? So one of the stories I was going to tell you guys about was that, in the past couple weeks, I spoke to a few brands. So one of them, they're a massive apparel brand. They're on Shark Tank. We'll probably do a case study at some point, which you guys will see shortly. But what was happening was that they had all of their stock inside of AWD. And this posed a few challenges for them, right? So they already have a separate 3PL, and they were basically just using AWD to avoid placement fees, which isn't the right solution, but Amazon kind of pushed this function onto them. On top of this, what happened was that there was 2 issues. One is that, 50% of their orders come from non-Amazon. So now they had to separate their stock. So they had a 3PL here, and then they were using AWD, and those systems didn't talk, right? And they had a TikTok that blew up, but they don't have any stock left, and you can't grab it from AWD because it's almost isolated. So this posed a huge challenge. And then secondly, was that a lot of their products are seasonal, right? So like their biggest day of the year is like July 4th, right? So they sell, American t-shirts and all that cool stuff. But the challenge with that is that AWD, and because of the inventory limits, it wasn't forecasting properly. And so they weren't actually allowed to send into Amazon, which was a function of inventory ASIN limit challenges and so forth. But the issue at hand is that they couldn't switch to FBM. You couldn't speed up inbounds because AWD will take 15, 20, 30 days to inbound to the DC. So they're stuck, right? Which is a huge challenge. Or another brand that we spoke to, they're a really large supplement brand. They're manufactured in India. They have a big facility in Texas, a big 3PL that they utilize. So what was happening was that they would ship it from Texas. It would then all get sent to the 3PL in Texas. So they would manufacture in India. They would bring all the stock to Houston, Texas. And that 3PL was doing the D2C. They also sell B2B, like all the major retailers like Whole Foods and Loblaws and so forth. And then instead of shipping right to Amazon, they then ship it to AWD and let AWD do the replenishments to Amazon. And we're scratching our heads of why would you add, this entire leg to Amazon AWD, pay for the storage, right, on a cubic basis, get charged $2.70 per case, and then also pay for the transport to their warehouse and then from their warehouse, and it's going to take, 15 to 30 days. And their answer was, well, 1, we don't know better. And then 2, they love the simplicity of just shipping to one location, right? So these are the challenges that we've had to go through. So in our solution, we wanted to completely, we want to do all their fulfillment. And because we have an AWD style solution, we're actually going to do it right from our warehouse. So we'll use our Dallas facility. We'll do the D2C. We'll do the B2B. But then as we're doing this AWD, we don't need to send it to a whole other facility, right? Like we'll do the bulk storage. We'll do the splits to multiple facilities. And we have trucks going every single day. So we solve all these things, but we basically remove AWD, which for this merchant was running $100,000 a month in costs between transport, the case forwarding, the storage cost. All these things add up. But on top of that, they were out of stock during peak time during the year, right? So this is basically what we're solving for. And I'm on so many conversations, which is why I've just been so bullish on this idea of, how do we build our program a little bit more in public and just talk about the challenges, because it right now is the most requested solution that we're looking for. And I would say probably half the calls our sales team take is, hey, we're using AWD or we're exploring AWD. how do you guys compete? Because at the end of the day, merchants just they're simple, right? They want cheaper, they want faster, right? And they want communication transparency. Truly, it's not NASA that we're solving for. And this has kind of been our goal for the year. I've been obsessing over this. And between this and our seller fulfilled prime products, these are like the two things that we're really going into. And so I've been in the warehouse basically trying to reconfigure how we think about auto replenishment, how our technology basically mimics an AWD bulk replenishment workflow. And because it needs all these different parts, it needs our technology, it needs the infrastructure, it needs the movement to be efficient enough to compete with Amazon AWD rates. And we also need the freight consolidation to mimic the cross-docking strategy that they use as well. We also need to do it with a 1/1,000,000th of a budget that they're operating with. And all of these things pose different challenges. But talking to a lot of merchants have really been able to expedite this because they know what they want, and we're just kind of taking these feedback loops in stride. So when merchants traditionally are using us compared to AWD, I just want to quickly go through some of the pros and cons, right? So I think where we've seen Amazon AWD perform really well is if you are an Amazon only model, right? Maybe you're already tied into their AGL, you're using AWD and you're using FBA, and you only sell on the Amazon FBA marketplace, you're not selling in e-com or retail, it can be a great solution. The challenge you have to watch out for is, can they replenish in time to Amazon? That's traditionally a huge challenge. And depending on the SKU catalog, are they doing forecasting properly, right? So if you launch a new SKU, Amazon AWD auto replenishments might not be able to fully solve it. Or maybe you have high value goods that you need someone to talk to and communicate with. This is traditionally where we've seen the most challenges. We get the question often, us, AWD, pros, cons, when does it make sense? AWD can be a great product, right? I think it's meant for very specific types of merchants. I think what happened was that Amazon overextended to fill the warehouses, and merchants end up thinking that it was kind of a one size fits all, which it isn't, right? Where I think we've seen AWD thrive is you might have like low to mid value items. You exclusively sell on Amazon, so you don't need that inventory for B2B, D2C, and so forth. And it allows you for a simple model, basically a hands-free infrastructure to be able to ship into Amazon. Now, where we've seen the challenges arise, if you sell omnichannel, so if you're selling a TikTok and your retail and all these other places, you want inventory to be fluid, right? That's the word that I made up, but this is my word now to take is fluid. And what I mean by that is, can your inventory basically bob and weave, right? This is a new age of e-commerce, and it's not a one size fits all. So we had a merchant whose TikTok blew up, right? They needed to reposition some stock from Amazon or their retail over to TikTok. The other brand launched on Costco, which immediately, the ranking is traditionally retail, Amazon, D2C. That's what a lot of, because you need to keep those supplier relationships. So they had a new retail launch with Walmart. The priority of where you have inventory for immediately changes ranks. So you need to be, almost agile and be able to bob and weave with an inventory strategy. And the challenge with AWD is that your inventory's stuck. So say you have a piece of content blow up and all your stock's in AWD and you run out at your 3PL, right? You're stuck. You got 15, 20, 30 days until you can actually get a hold of that, right? So that's a challenge. On top of that, what we've also seen is things like if you have high value goods, right? So Amazon AWD, unless you're a big player, sometimes it can be challenging to get a hold of the right person because it's all automated, right? They have such a big team and such a sophisticated technology. Everything is systems. So if you're not, one of the biggest cats, you might have challenges with, getting a hold of someone versus with us, you can walk through our front door, right? Like, our warehouses are open. You can come see us at any moment. Or you might have high value goods, right? So if you have high value goods like jewelry or a couple $100s, right? You might want some specific insurance on that, right? Because if you lose a few of those could be really costly. Other things that we've seen that usually aren't a great fit for AWD is, there's a misconception that AWD can do B2B, which basic, simple retailers, maybe like a Fair or a small mom and pop, phenomenal. They can do a great job. But if you're expecting them to do Costco compliance with all the, ASN routing and, specific compliance labels, they won't be able to, right? Like that is a very challenging workflow. Same with Walmart, same with all the big retailers. That will pose challenges for you at the current stage. Will they get there? Maybe. Do you want to be the test trial? I don't know, right? You have to make that decision. The other categories that we've traditionally seen is things like meltables, right? So anything CPG. Amazon doesn't take a liking to it naturally so that could be supplements, probiotics, chocolates. Some of these facilities, are temp, non-temp. That poses potential challenges for the merchant, which you might want to potentially avoid. You might not even be able to allow to use it, right? Or big and bulky. Because how they charge on a cubic footage, big and bulky can get very expensive very, very quickly. And it's not built for the design of an AWD workflow. AWD workflow is built for simple, small, light items. They come from overseas, and you can pair up AGL with AWD with FBA and have a very simple auto replenishment solution, right? That's where it makes the most sense. And brands that are doing otherwise are putting themselves in a very, very difficult position, especially approaching, a Q4 or seasonal spike season. I think the key thing that we've learned over time is you have to diversify, right? So you will naturally always put yourself in a difficult position when you put your entire logistics infrastructure in the hands of one person. It's the same reason that we see, they might utilize AMZ Prep as a fulfillment partner, but they might use a few other partners. And it's not because we don't do a great job, but they're just, baselining risk until, they're very confident in the solution at hand. And I think people sometimes just overbet on Amazon. And it's an incredible team, but they'll have challenges, and you're not the biggest fish in the sea, and that poses a lot of different, intricacies that you have to be able to navigate. So I think more importantly is test the waters, right? See if the solution is well for you. But I think what I've learned more than anything is you have to pick your battles, and you have to make sure that the solution makes sense for you. I think at the moment, we're building this because there's a clear gap in the market that we're so excited on building. And like we're geeking out every single day, trying to make it better and create a solution that can actually service merchants in a very similar flow. And, we're just kind of, going up there. Now, one of the last things I'll mention is that there's things that I think Amazon is almost, I don't want to per se saying blocking, but there's limitations of what we can do. So auto replenishment, there's been a big challenge of how to do that because that's an Amazon almost like proprietary product. So there's some things that we're trying to get through that, we want to mimic one-to-one, but we also, we don't want to bite the hand that feeds us either. So I think what brands really need to think about was that last year was difficult and, merchants lost a lot of money. And I think sometimes, I do it often, right? I'll be speeding and driving. And when you initially pass that cop car, you're like, whoa. I'm never doing this again. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to become, a simple driver that stays under, driving 40 on the freeway. And then as time kind of goes on, a couple minutes later, you're speeding again. I look at that is kind of how people think about AWD. And so I think what happened last year was that brands got hurt. Brands lost a lot of money, and they over-indexed in a solution, which you shouldn't do for anyone, ever, right? Like, whether it's us, whether it's AWD, again, you have to diversify. You have to be able to bob and weave accordingly. You have to not put all your eggs in one basket. It's as simple as that. But I think what happened is that as time passes, you forget about the pain. And more importantly, as we enter Q4 again, this ability to make sure that you stay in stock is the only metric that matters. And you need to build a strategy around doing exactly that, right? Put costs aside because that's just one factor of the equation. If you're out of stock, nothing else matters. And as you plan for Q4, reflect on last year, reflect on how you're going to do it, and build an infrastructure that makes sense for you. And we're going to keep building what we're doing because I think we're doing a great damn job at it. And I think as a takeaway for the merchant, look at both, right? Maybe you have some stock with AWD, you have some with AMZ, right? We see that otherwise, and we can almost compare and contrast the pros, the cons, and it makes us way better too because then we have live feedback. So, winter's coming, Q4's ahead of us, we have to prep accordingly, and I think this is just about, hedge your bets. And I think that's kind of the takeaway for this episode. Thank you guys for listening. I had a pretty long day with the travel, so I'm logging out, but we'll be back soon. Thanks.